Jayā. One more. Ready to go. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majamam Ashmadachara Prayantam Bande Gurum Param Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. Enjoy, Ma. So picking up from last week, I think this may be a little hot. Maybe lower a little bit. This one. Just a tiny bit. Maybe I'm just where the speaker is. Is it loud enough or is it too loud? Okay. So we're continuing our discussions of the Kālī Sahasranāma Stotram, the 1,000 names of Kālī. And we are on, last week we started verse 30 with names 2, 25, 26, 27. We're in that area there. And the previous week we did names that are associated with Lakshmi, including the words Mahalakshmi, Lakshmi, and other qualities of Lakshmi. And then last week we began the Nīla Sarasvatī, Sarasvatī, srotasvatī, and mātaṁgī. Right, these are all related. So these are a cluster of names related to Saraswati. So within the, I'll chant the verse to catch up. Srotasvatī, sarasvatī, mātaṁgī, Vijayā, Jayā, Nadī Sindhu, Sarvamayī, Tārā, śūnya-nivāsinī. Sorry. So now we're at Vijayā and Jayā. So Vijayā and Jayā, these are, usually we often hear Jayā, Vijayā. That's how we usually hear it. Here it's Vijayā and Jayā. It may just be for poetic beauty. And a lot of times a lot of the names that we usually see in a particular order in the hymn seem to appear in a different order. Maybe it's to keep it fresh, perhaps. But Jayā and Vijayā, that combination is very often included. So Jayā has a meaning, a direct meaning as a word. So and these names are Ma's gunas. She has those qualities, or she is those qualities, whatever Jayā is and Vijayā is. Everybody here probably knows what Jayā is. Jayā means victory. It's a simple thing, right? Comes from the root ji, or j, which means like to conquer, winning, victorious, something like that. Jayā. We go Jai Ma, Jai Sri Krishna. We use a similar type of thing. It's related. Usage a little different. There it means, I could say victory at the Divine Mother, of course, or sometimes means like glory, or Yay Ma, Jai Ma becomes Yay Ma. It's used like that. But you can say, but translation is very nice, like victory to the Divine. What a beautiful idea, Of course, we know in the story there's constant battles between the goddess and demonic forces, and we also know the story that she always wins. So we want her to win, like that. But we say Jai Sri Krishna, Jai, anything we're both praying for victory, that the divine becomes victorious in our lives or in society, but also just a method. It's become a method of glorification. But as a noun, it's also a name for the goddess. There is a goddess Jayā, right? And I think, I'm pretty sure, I'm forgetting just now, in this 64 yoginis, I think one of them is Jayā, for instance, it's in that list, different lists. But so it's interesting. So there's Jayā and Jayā, right? That long A here, it's a long A. This is a group of Devi names. So Jayā and Vijayā, right? They're long A's showing kind of like we Shiva and Shiva. Shiva is a masculine term. Shiva is a feminine term. So when you say like one of Ma's names in the in the Sarvamangala, Shiva Datri Sahasranāma. No, that's right. I guess that's there. Shiva. It's one of those famous hymns. I'm just freaking, my brain's a little jumbled. That Shiva doesn't necessarily mean that it's like that she's Shiva. It's like Shiva has a meaning, is that of goodness, pure goodness and benevolence. So she is the one who's benevolent. But when it's coupled, Shiva Shiva or Shiva Shivani then it becomes Shiva and Parvati. Right, so sometimes it's Jaya and Jaya could be a name for Shiva, Jaya be a name for Dev, something like that too, right? But in order to understand, I think the full significance of the goddesses Jaya and Vijaya, right? We have to understand Jaya and Vijaya in general, because they have a back. They're famous characters. Most people here know Jaya and Vijaya as characters, not just as the words. We'll start with like that. So the Jayas, like everybody knows that Jaya and Vijaya are the gatekeepers of Vishnu, right? And in Vaikuntha, Lord Vishnu has two gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya. There's many stories about them, right? But we have to see where did they come from? So the Jaya is a quality. It's a name for the goddess, a goddess. It's means victory. It's the name of one of the gatekeepers of Vishnu, but there were also Jayas. Just like there's Ganapati, the Lord of the Ganapati, but there were also a whole category of divine being called the Ganapatyas. That became one of which Ganapati became foremost among them. So there were an ancient category of deities called the Jayas, and there were 12 great gods created by Brahma before creation. When Brahma's job was to create the world. So what did he do? So out of his mind, he created the Jayas, thinking they would be victorious and they'd start the process of creation. Right. They were born. They're like Manasaputra. They were born from his mind, out of his svabhava. But they became lost in samadhi and didn't do anything. Right? They became lost in samadhi and neglected their job of creation and propagation so then later he creates in the Bhagavatam there's an interesting list at the beginning where then Brahma creates the Rudras, and they try to destroy the world. That didn't work, and eventually he creates the Kumaras, the four Kumaras, and they also these four boys now go and create. But the thing is, at the beginning of creation there's only Sattva Guna, right? There's no real, of course Brahma represents Rajaguna, but everything's fresh, so it's Sattva Guna. And so there's no reason, there's no attraction, there's no stimulation rajasically to have children and start a family and start the whole process of creation, right? So the four Kumaras also just go and meditate, and they immediately run off. They stay, they're born as little children, with their tapasya and their purity, they stay little children and run off to become yogis. So that doesn't work. So 3-4 times he creates different things and he's saying, my job is to create. What am I going to do? So eventually he creates a Prajapati. We consider the Prajapatis like Daksha and others, We've told the story of Prajapati Daksha already in these talks. But because these Jayas, these first 12, they didn't do their job. They were born as humans. They didn't do their job of creation. They were cursed, right? They would be reborn again and again in every manvantara for 7 manvantaras. So this is how we know how they came. And they're interesting. Ajitas, Tushitas, Satyas, Harish, Vaikunthas, Sadyas, and Adityas. These are the 12 Jayas, their background. Vijaya, what does Vijaya? Jaya means victory. V is, in Sanskrit, is used, sometimes we say it's like specialized or extra, but it means like, it's usually used, I'm not so expert at Sanskrit, but as far as I understand, it's used to broaden the scope. So Jaya means victory, Vijaya means greater victory or more victory. It's like broaden the scope, whatever word attached to. Like Chakra used in the Bhagavad Gita, it says Jnana and Vijnana. There's knowledge and what's broader knowledge, or truer knowledge, or more intimate knowledge, or sometimes we translate that as realized knowledge. Like Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of like knowing that milk comes from a cow is knowledge. Anybody can learn that and have correct knowledge or incorrect knowledge if you don't know it, right? But to milk a cow, right? That's and then to drink the milk and then be strengthened by the milk. That's called Vijnana. That's a specialized. You have a different type of knowledge. So V is used in that sense. Sometimes in a weird, just for the sake of completion, sometimes V is used opposite, right? I can't think of just now examples, but I was thinking of examples how V sometimes means the opposite of something, right? An example, you can see there's one popularly used, like a deshi in India, somebody who's born in the land. That's like an Indian born Indian. That makes, the deshi. And a Videshi, right, is somebody is usually with, like, somebody says, oh, there's some Videshi sadhu living at the ashram, means a foreigner. Videshi, right? So so there you can see actually means a specialized, but it often means not in that use. You can see how it kind of, and you usually know that by its use, just by its use. There's no direct rule, right? So Jayā and Vijayā, these victory and even more victory. In the stories, the most common stories, there are the gatekeepers, the Lord Vaikuntha, the Lord Vishnu's abode. Vaikuntha, Kara Dwara Padakas, or the doorway protectors. And Vaikuntha means a palace or place of bliss. Okay, so that's the highest heaven of Lord Vishnu. Like we think of, like Brahma's heaven is called Satyaloka. Shiva's heaven is Kailasham. We use, Devi's heaven is called Devipuram, or Mani Dvipa. There's a couple different, descriptions. Some idea of the highest possible heaven, and every sect puts when the stacking of the heavens, their God's heaven. Like I can tell you, this is the absolute truth. You don't need to read anything after this. Just accept it. It's proof. The Vedas say. Right, that in the Devi Bhagavatam time, it mentions the supreme goddess's realm as, I think it's Mani Dvip. I think that's what is described. Right, it's a reference to the Sri Yantra. Right, and it's considered the highest. It's called Mani Dvip because it's the highest. And why is it higher? Because there's Satyaloka, there's Gokula, there's Vaikuntha. It describes all these, but it acts as a shadow, an umbrella over all those. This is a way of putting your God literally on top, the highest possible heaven, right? So Vaikuntha in the Vaishnava conception is the highest possible heaven, but now you know that Mani Dvip is higher, slightly higher than Vaikuntha. And so their job is they're the gatekeepers at the doorway to the palace, or doorway to the audience hall of Lord Vishnu. We mentioned that these. The four the Lord Brahma's other sons, the four Kumaras, they had tremendous tapasya, and they decided, I don't want to grow up. Right? You see what happens to grown-ups. Right? As soon as you have grown up, your body changes, your responsibility changes, desire is awakened in the mind, and they didn't want anything to do with that. Right? So they stayed in the body of children, right? And they wandered around naked as little innocent and pure, like little children, completely beyond duality. But they weren't little children. They're adults, right? Not just adults, they were sages. Not just sages of tremendous tapasya, power, right? And so they one day, like every good sage, you want to enter the abode of bliss and have darshan of the Lord. So they got there. And the Bhagavatam says that seeing these four little naked children, it's like, you can't come in, right? There's no place for children. Either, you're not dressed properly, and there's no place for children, right? But also it's not the time Lord Vishnu is sleeping. This is a time, between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock, all temples are closed, including heaven. Doors of heaven's closed. We used to have a thing here to be able to close. We haven't been able to close. Our new design doesn't have a place to close. You see in many temples, they close the doors. Dakshineshwar closes. They do Bhogarati, and the doors close. After they give Lord their lunch, Maha her lunch, then they do Arati and close the door until 4:30, tea time. Everybody wakes up, have a cup of tea. Lord wakes up and is willing to see people again. So he came at that time. So he said, you can't come in. And they had the power of rishis, right? And the nature of children in a certain sense. And they got very, very angry. And so they cursed these two gatekeepers, Jayā and Vijayā. May you be born as on earth. May you be born as humans, or you be born like in the mortal realm. Because remember, you think they've attained heaven, right? They're heavenly realm. They're residents of heaven. And usually you think once you attain heaven, that's it. Either we don't consider like Vaikuntha or Kailasha as like a temporary heaven that mentioned in the scriptures. There's a temporary heaven that you get some good karma. When the good karmas are worked out, then you take birth again. If you go to some temporary hell until your bad karmas are worked out, then again you're born on earth. Not that Vaikuntha is usually not seen that way. You get to Vaikuntha, you're in Vaikuntha. You get to the gates of heaven, you're in heaven. That's kind of the idea. But they said you have to leave, right, and be born for 7 lives, and so this is horrible. But then like Vishnu realized what's happening. Something just happened in my court, right? It's like these great sages, great devotees, right? The sons of Brahma, right? Pure, perfected souls, right? Siddhas, right? They've just been cursed. So he immediately gets up and runs to see them, which is interesting. That they were denied vision of the Lord, but the Lord ran to see them. That's a significant thing. And he realized what happened. And so, and he said, please, and so the Jayā and Vijayā are praying, please make the curse go away, make the curse go away. We don't want to leave heaven. We're here serving you. We finally attained, however they attained this position. But Vishnu said, no, the words of a holy person will have to bear fruit. You can't take back a curse. Be careful when you curse people. Right? Blessings and curses can't be taken back, right? He said, but they can be mitigated. I shall mitigate it, right? With permission of the 4 Kumaras, which also come down by that point, right? They also were willing to mitigate the curse. Even like sometimes there's many stories of somebody, a sage curses somebody, right? And then somebody begs forgiveness, and the person says, okay, I can't take the curse back, but we'll give it a twist that it's not so bad, perhaps. But Lord Vishnu, he gives them a choice of being born 7 lives as devotees, which they automatically are, devotees of the Lord for 7 lives, or 3 lives as people who hate the Lord. This is very interesting. 7 lives as people who love the Lord, or 3 lives as haters of God. This is a very peculiar position. What would you choose? It's like you can be a devotee or a demon. Here, a demon is not a different category of being. It means somebody who hates God as a demon in this dichotomy. But because they had so much love for God, the thought of being away from Him for 7 lives was unbearable. So better to be 3 lives as a demon than 7 lives as a devotee. They chose to be born 3 lives as demons. Very strange story. A devotee is close to the Lord, but she'll be born as 3 lives as demons away from the Lord, right? In a certain sense. But your point is we'll find out who they become. Maybe you already know who they became, who these characters became. They're born in 3 yugas. It's not just like life after life. So it's 7 lives could have been. These are divine beings, so 7 lives mean 7 yugas. So 3 lives mean 3 yugas. Not so. You think 7 lives is not that big of a deal. Average life 70 to 100 years. It's not so bad. It's not like that. These are divine beings. They have a divine lifespan. So they were born. Jayā and Vijayā accepted that curse. They had to leave Vaikuntha and be born on earth. Right. Their first birth was in Sattva Yuga as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Right, the Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, these are 2 great titans of the underworld of the ancient times. The main story, Hiranyaksha, there are 2 brothers. Hiranyaksha stole the earth and plunged into the underworld, stole it into the causal ocean. Lord Vishnu took the form of the divine boar as Varaha, thank you, and slayed Hiranyakashipu. There's different versions of the story, but slayed Hiranyakashipu, lifted the earth back up and put her back in her place. That's the main story. But then, just like that character from Princess Bride, you killed my brother, prepare to die. His brother Hiranyakashipu, we really didn't like Vishnu, right? And he said, "You killed my brother," and he hated Vishnu, and did everything in his power, and he had a lot of power to fight Vishnu and he performed tremendous austerity to get power. And he got everybody knows the story. He got a special boon, and what was his boon? That he wouldn't be be able to be killed by man or by animal, inside or outside, daytime or nighttime, on the floor or in the sky, by weapons or by hand, by, not all of them, I forget, I think, but all these different dualities. And we've given literally probably 100 talks on this story, so I'm not going to rehash the story. But we've given 100 talks of the story because we love the story. I love the story. It's like the best possible story. So much in it. But eventually the Lord fulfills all those requirements and appears in the form of the man lion, right? As Nada man and lion, and kills him. So he's neither man nor beast. That's satisfied. He doesn't do it daytime or nighttime, but right at dusk. Neither on the floor or in the sky, but on his lap. Neither inside nor outside, but in the doorway. Neither by weapon or by hand, but by his claws, which are neither weapons or hand. Like that, he satisfies every requirement. There's a few others I'm forgetting. Right? These are the main ones we think about. Right? And so showing that there's always a way. Right? And so, but this is the main story. He gets killed. But it's interesting. He gets killed in the doorway. And so the Jayā and Vijayā often come back to this doorway, at these sandhyas between things. Right, there are deities. We'll come back to this with my notes a few pages later. These are deities of doorway. These are threshold. Threshold. Once I get it wrong, threshold deities. Right. So they're in this story. They're shown in every single point. They're at the meeting point of things. So in Treta Yuga, they're born again. So you can say, in the story, he liberates Nrsimhadev, and Nrsimhadev. Hiranyakashipu, and he attains his original form. So does he attain liberation, go to heaven? No, he takes another birth as Ravana, and his brother becomes Ravana's brother as Kumbhakarna, right? So that's according to some. There's different versions of the story. I'm telling you the general mainline story. So again, in Treta Yuga, first he's killed by Vishnu as Narasingha, right? In Treta Yuga, he's killed by Rama. Vishnu as Rama, right? He's born as Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And in Dwapara Yuga, he's born as Shishupala and Dantavaktra, and you're killed by Krishna. Sometime in the stories, and I think when our talks we gave that version of the story for ease of continuity. Sometimes you're saying, this is Kamsa and it's Kamsa's brother, Charuna, I think. Kamsa and Charuna, I think. Right. That's not the main version of the story, but that's some texts will say like that. But in the classical, in the Bhagavatam, it mentions like this. These are two demons that Krishna killed in the final liberation. And then in Kālī Yuga, again they attain the abode of Vishnu, and they're again right now. In case you're wondering, it's Kālī Yuga. So if you make it to, I hope you guys make it to Vaikuntha on the way to Manidweep. I hope when you go to Vaikuntha. When you go to Vaikuntha, okay, please forgive. When you go to Vaikuntha and you meet the other, you'll meet Jayā and Vijayā and say, "We heard about you. Swami Bhajanananda told us all about you. You had a great story." But it's very interesting to be born as a hater of God, and in the stories, that's why Kamsa also works, because Kamsa sometimes listed as one of their incarnations instead of Shishupala. Because Kamsa is in the beautiful story where he was obsessed with Krishna. He hated and feared him so much that his meditation was unbroken. Same with Hiranyakashipu, complete meditation on Vishnu, right? And Ravana, complete meditation on Rama, right? And so, as lovers of God, we try to, of course, the one we love, we think about, right? But we don't. The problem, even no matter if we love a lot, we don't always think about it. Sometimes there's other things come in our mind. We have other affections. Other people that we love, other things that we love. We love ourselves also, and that gets in the way. All this type of stuff mixes in. We don't have much mental discipline. But if you're really angry and you hate somebody or really angry with somebody, no matter what you do, you can't let it go. It's a very powerful way of meditation. I don't suggest it. This is not the normal method of devotion, right? But it's example. They meditated so much, like pretty soon, like Kamsa. Everybody, he was so he by hatred and by fear was his meditation, right? Every noise, like, is that Krishna trying to kill me? Is that Krishna who's going to try to kill me? Is that Krishna? Yes, Krishna's trying to, and he's so obsessed with it. But think of that we should be that That we should be that obsessed. We should see everything about, is that Krishna? Is that Krishna? Is that Kālī? Is that yes. And an interesting thing, those who want to fight God. This is an interesting part because remember his name here, her name, because we're telling the stories about these characters, Jayā and Vijayā, but these are names not of the characters. These are characters of Ma. So her name is victory, and supreme, and ever victorious, right? And so victory means victory. So if you fight the one whose name is victorious, you're going to lose. Right, and I've told the story. One of our very dear devotees didn't come here for a long time, and he was going through his own inner world with Ma, and he made a statement that, why haven't you come? He says, oh, I'm fighting with Ma. He had some reason. I'm sure his own bhava was that, And I pointed out, so you know all the stories. Has anybody fought with Ma in the Bhagavatam or it's Krishna like that and won? Everyone loses. You say, better just surrender. Right, that's faster, Because Krishna says, however you approach me, I respond. And so if you approach him as a friend, he's the best friend. He's supreme, right? If you approach him, or she's supreme. If you approach as a lover, the best lover. If you approach him as an enemy, the best enemy. If you want to fight, the best fighter. Her name is Jayā and Vijayā, right? So I put in my notes. Name means victory. She will win. That's my official note. That's how good I made. Mm-hmm.
So it's not the Shaktis.
Here I'm talking just of setting up the Jayā and Vijayā. Yeah. So, but the names here are not Vijayā. Here it's Vijayā, Jayā, Vijayā. The feminine, these are Devi. So just like Jayā and Vijayā have a meaning and they're characters in a very famous story as gatekeepers. So in the Shakta tradition, it has a meaning. There are special forms, there are distinct forms of the goddess, and they have their characters in the Shakta tradition. So we have to think about this. So Jayā is her name. There's a deity, a goddess named Jayā, right? It's one of the 64 matrikas. We worship her only distinctly. It was a flower. I mean, once a year we offer her a flower. During the third day of Durga Puja. There's a thing where you worship the 64 yoginis, matrikas, 64 yoginis, 64 matrikas, there's the 32 bahuka. There's all these different categories of deities. It's a very elaborate. We're worshiping the yantra that the god sits on, right? So she's worshipped during that the special form of If we were to do it more elaborately, you can actually do a 5-item or 10-item worship of each of these deities. But then at Belarmouth they do like that. You can watch it on TV. It is very fast. Lots of deities have to be worshipped. This is one of her, and she's considered a part of Durga's retinue. Durga comes with all these Shaktis, so one of her Shaktis is Jayā. Right. Vijayā is a name for Devi, given when she destroyed a demon called Padmasura. When she killed Padmasura, she was given the name Vijayā, meaning she were completely victorious after this horrible demon. And her temple was established in Kashmir, so there's a famous temple in Kashmir of Vijayā. Right. Vijayā also, just for completion, just to fit all the little details, is a period of time. There's a very auspicious giving and victory granting. There's auspicious and inauspicious periods of time. There's a very auspicious period of time. I'll give you the exact details. It's an exact moment called Vijayā, right? And it comes on the 10th day of Ashwinim of the month, Shukla Paksha, the bright north, when the stars appear. So we call that Vijaya Dashami. Right? We even call it, because this is the 10th day during Durga Puja festival. There's a day when Ma is victorious, right? But the exact moment of Vijaya Dashami is just at that moment when the sun's going up, but just when the first stars appear. That's the Vijaya hour. So Vijaya is also a moment, so she is that hour. She's victorious of that time. Now, in the Vishnu story, Jayā and Vijayā are the attendants or the gatekeepers of the Devi, and in the Devi tradition, they're not really gatekeepers in the same way, but they're attendants. So, like in a Vishnu temple, like if you go to the Malibu temple, the Balaji temple, before you get in, before the Bhupur, there's a beautiful deity of Vijaya, and people go and get their permission to enter the Vaikuntha, which is now the temple, is a miniature replica or expansion or of Vaikuntha. identical to Vaikuntha. But so Jayā and Vijayā can be like that, but usually they're not really visualized as like doorkeepers in the normal sense. They're doorkeepers a little different. They flank her, right? And so we don't. The thing is, in popular Hinduism, we don't see this as much. Where you have the goddess, usually we see the goddess, and you see two devis next to her. The one we see that the most in our is Chinnamasta. You see the Dakini and Varani, right, left and right, her two attendants, right, and the whole story, and actually they'll be very significant. But you'll see some old paintings and drawings where there'll be the goddess Kālī or goddess Jagadatri or Jagadamba, some form of the goddess, and she'll have two other goddesses next to her. These are her attendants. And I first really noticed them. Haley Goswami, who painted a lot of these beautiful paintings around us, he took us to some very old Devi temples in Bengal. And these are temples that like Ram Prasad would have been visited. And these are like before Calcutta was a city, this was all jungle. Even now when they're excavating, they're finding human skulls, maybe from human sacrifice. These are jungle traditions. These were swamp areas, these very ancient temples. And it's not Jagadatri. I forget they call it Jagadamba or something, like World Mother. And it looks like Durga. It looks like Mahishasura Mardini. It's that pose where she's killing Mahishasura. But there's no Lakshmi Saraswati. Usually in the popular form, we have Ma Durga killing Mahishasura, and you have Lakshmi Saraswati, and then Ganesha and Kartikeya, right? Her attendants become Lakshmi Saraswati, her daughters in the story, right? And then Ganesha. But in these temples, it looked like it's just the same form, Ma Durga, white, yellow, big eyes, made of neem wood. Interesting. There's 500-600-year-old deities because their neem doesn't get eaten by bugs, so they're very ancient deities. They don't rot, right? And did you see any of those temples? It's very. He took from Priyadas, I think, and myself, maybe Ambikananda, I don't remember. But they're flanked by two other goddess type characters, and that's Jayā and Vijaya, Jayā and Vijaya, right? Very interesting. That was the first I really like. Oh, that's different. Oh, this is my. It's not me. She said, who are they? Who's Lakshmi? Is that Lakshmi and Saraswati? No, But Lakshmi and Saraswati, they've served that function in the common story of Durga Puja, right? Attendants of the goddess. And so in the form that has Jayā and Vijaya most popular I mentioned is the Chinnamasta. We've given many talks on Chinnamasta, and we think about her a lot. And the most common and not far-fetched interpretation of the Chinnamasta story and the image is the Dakini and Vajrani are interpreted as seen as Ida and Pingala, right? So you have the two channels, the two currents in the body from tantric yogic perspective, right? And then Chinnamasta is a primary Sushumna. And so we know, and so when Ma cuts off her own head, which we'll get to a little bit, the blood springs from her head and feeds Ida and Pingala, her two attendants, who we've told the story already, and then she also drinks from the central spout, which is Ida, Pingala, Sushumna. So Jayā and Vijaya, in goddess symbolism, it's not just the normal idea of a doorkeeper of it between realms, although they serve that function also. It's symbolic of the two attendant deities, not gatekeeper deities. Attendant deity of the Devi, and the Devi being associated with Shaktism and Tantra, and interpreted as Kundalini, the gifts in the body of Kundalini. When the two attendants become Ida and Pingala, the two currents, and therefore the doorway is not just between not Vaikuntha and Vaikuntha, or outside the temple and inside the temple. We have a doorway, any type of threshold, but the threshold is a different threshold. It's in between Ida and Pingala, between thinking and feeling, between in breath and out breath. It's a deeper. It's not just between big states. It's become very subtle. It's the doorway is finding, if you have finding the exact way through. And in yoga we believe that it has to be balanced. Everything has to be balanced so that the prana moves. Usually prana is moving through either Ida and Pingala, right? But that's fine. Ida and Pingala that's called life. We have Ida and Pingala activities and thoughts and feelings and actions, right? But for spiritual life, we're told that we have to, it's a different orientation. We have a different level of experience, a little subtlety of experience. And to find that balance is not easy. To balance it out is not easy, right? So then it's not just like what you can see between the doorway becomes Ida and Pingala, right? It's between these two. You can bump. What happens? We bump into this one. We bump into this one. We never find the door doesn't open. Is the problem. We have two, so it becomes almost like two pillars. You can imagine, rather than like a different spatial interpretation of the doorway. Interesting. Doorways are very interesting things. Of course, in order to get into the temple, in order to get to Ma, you have to pass through like 6 of them, right? Interesting. Like we have the first doorway out. There's a gate out there, and if you notice on the gate, that outer gate, we have we do it simple in order to match the neighborhood. We can't do a big pillared thing, with frightening gargoyles and like you see our neighbors have gargoyles on the outside of their fence. These are the protection type stuff. But we have on both sides what do we have? An elephant and a horse, right? I think that's right. Right, and so those, I'm forgetting just now, I didn't think about this, but I thought about it, but I didn't write it down. The elephant and the horse, we're Aya, Haradan Aya, Sri Chaitanananda Saraswati of the Rajarajeshwari Pitam in New York, Rochester, New York. He came and suggested that we put these, because they represent 2 protective deities in Goddess Tripura Sundari, Lalita Tripura Sundari's army. Right, I'm forgetting exactly, but they're 2 famous. Their symbols are the elephant and the horse. I think one runs Ma's cavalry, and one runs her elephant, her cavalry of elephants. It's not cavalry, but her elephant group of elephants. I don't know, in the battles like that. And so, not to put fierce deities with swords and spikes on the outside. He said just do that. That could be enough to protect. He says when you put them, no unwanted person will be able to step through. Right, I hope that's the case. That you step through. The fact that you step through, these 2 have checked you out, at least for now, and said you can go through. Then we have the second set of deities at the second gate into the courtyard, right? And who do we have there? We also what do we put there? Our Philip, who designed our temple or our expansion, he designed these niches. He said, you can put some important statue there. So he designed it thinking there should be some sort of threshold deity, not knowing who it would be. So we said we could put Jayā Vijaya, we could the feminine form of Jayā Vijaya. We can put another common thing. A lot of Ramakrishna missions will have in India will have Hanuman and Garuda, right? These are also protective. Both of them are protective deities into the realm. The Chennai ashram has Ram and Krishna, right? Interesting. Ram and Krishna. Those are the outside deities because he was Ram, who's Krishna inside, has become Rama, something like that. I'm imagining there's why that is the case. It could also be Ram and Krishna are very popular, and it's a way to present temples for the devotees to worship when they come. I don't know, but we were thinking, but there's a form, Lalita Tripura Sundari. It's like Durga has Lakshmi and Saraswati on both sides, right? Lalita Tripura Sundari also seen. We don't have her here, but Tripura Sundari is also usually seen fanned by Lakshmi and Saraswati. Right, so that's why we have Lakshmi and Saraswati in their appropriate places, right? And that's a very nice thing to face the outside, that the blessings, that these are extremely benign deities, but they're the external side of the deity, as knowledge, wisdom, prosperity, health, happiness, safety, success. These are and we want, in a certain sense, those blessings of what happens in this space to flow out into the neighborhood, into the community of that space. And when people see them, they're not scary forms. These are the very benign forms of the goddess. But you can look at Saraswati and Lakshmi and never see who's in between, right? That's a thing. And if it ever happens, we think of Lakshmi, we think of Saraswati. We want health, happiness, success, fame, satisfaction, all these Lakshmi Saraswati things, right? And never notice that there's something deeper, something that you could easily, unless you look in between these 2 pillars and go through it, pass, in a certain sense, past them, not trying to be disrespectful to Lakshmi and Saraswati. Last week we talked about how she's Lakshmi and how she's Saraswati, right? But we have to go past them. And then again, And then in the courtyard we have Ganesha staring, so you can't. He's looking at the door. We also told Ayya told us to put Ganesha there, and then you come to the third door that also has Ganesha, right, at the entrance, and you walk through and there's a bell, right. So the bell also is a marker between the inside and the outside. If you go into Catholic Church, there's always a little water. So as you enter that crosshold, you bless yourself. I believe there's a little danger there. Though I was told when I was 12 years old, right? I wasn't that Catholic. We didn't go to church that regularly. My sister and previous generations all went to Catholic. So someone other with me was like, okay, done. Like I was never pushed through the system, so I didn't fully know. But I remember a neighbor took me, let's go to church, and she was a very, very Catholic Italian neighbors, very wonderful. And she told me, and I said, why are we doing it? She said, because the devil doesn't want you to go to church, and he'll attack you, right? And it's interesting. He's like, that's a very strange thing to tell a little kid, Like I was already overwhelmed by the whole thing, right? But still, there's not true. There's something to it that there's that transition between the regular outside world and the divine consecrated space of the temple. It's a dangerous place, and like we actually we take food prasadam, we go to the outside of the fence and feed spirits and demonic energy so that they stay away from. They're satisfied. They don't bother. They don't come into the space. We take prasadam every day. As the inner secrets of Kālī Mandir worship. We take prasadam most days, and we feed the protective deities, the 10 Dwara Devatas. We feed them in the Shiva corner. We give it to Shiva. Shiva gives it to the rest of them, and we feed him on the inside of the fence. We put something like that. Then we go on the outside of the fence in the southwest corner and feed the spirits and the destructive spirits. Right, that side is where that's by angle. We do that on the outside of the fence. We feed them, but we don't let them come. We don't. If we don't feed them outside, they may come inside. Right, that type of thing. We keep them outside. So this is actually very. If you've seen, I remember going to some Mukambika temple. I remember then they take the deity out and parikram the temple there 3-4 times a day. So first, the priest go. Everybody follow. The priest come take a big thing of rice, hot rice that was offered to the Devi, and they come and they put there's little asanas, little stone asanas at the 8 corners, right? And they go and they put rice there, and they're feeding all the directional deities. Like then the crows come and eat it, and then after doing that, then they bring Ma out, and they carry her out, and then they put her on a boat, and they carry her on a palanquin, on a cart. They have all this very direct, wonderful ways that they take her. But first, they go around and feed all some of the prasad gets given in all the corners of the temple. So suddenly you enter. So we have the bell to create that sound. We have holy water. We have these holy things for the transitional place. Of course, Holy Mother is there. And you cross underneath the picture of Krishna. You have to go past Ma Durga's yantra. These are all protective things. These are all significant things, right? Because this transition between worlds, magic, as Baba Rampur always says, magic happens where worlds meet, right? But danger happens where worlds meet. You look any Sunday, you look at, go to the street corner, and you've got to cross the street. These are 2 worlds meeting, right? You have to be careful. You have to bring extra attention when you cross this, when you enter a corner, when you go through, when you enter between worlds, right? And there's powerful things that, like hospitals are such places, right? Graveyards are such places, airports are such places. You see, there's like these where worlds meet. There's some special buzz, some special quality. And a temple is where worlds meet. In a temple, the 3 worlds meet here in the temple. That's the science of temple worship is to make the 3 worlds touch in one place, right? That usually they don't quite match. We have to find the exact place where they come. That's the place of the deity, right? But to enter that space is important. So a few little details that we try to remember and we sometimes forget about the threshold. It's not good to step onto a threshold, on the threshold. The Dakshineshwar, they always tell you if you ever get allowed to come into Ma's inner shrine of the temple, the first and the priest will, don't touch this, step over. You always step over. People touch it, but not with their feet. You step over that. So it's not a good habit to step on a doorway because there's deities in the doorway, right? There's all kinds of deities on both sides. The good deities you don't want to, the divine deities you don't want to be disrespectful, and the deities of that world. Of the other world, you don't want to piss off because they're not maybe not beneficial, right? So you have to be careful. Also, the thing is not to talk to somebody through a doorway, or give somebody a gift through a doorway, right? And so we do this sometime out of, when the doors are open, we're distributing prasad, something like that. Better you step out to give somebody something, or have them step in to give something, not through it. The doorway is a special space. Anyways, that's the door. But Ida and Pingala are another type of doorway. They're very narrow door we can easily miss, right, to go through there. I'm remembering just before the tea that I'm about to drink, that I forgot to drink. So the goddess has her attendants that represent Ida and Pingala, and her protective attendants, her caretakers, her doorkeepers, all that, how you think, Jayā and Vijayā. So whenever she comes with her attendants, right? We don't always see, but their attendants are there. So there's a story where several times people saw Holy Mother, Sri Sharada Devi, as different forms of the goddess. The most common, or one of the common forms that people saw her, is Jagadatri. And Bengal, Jagadatri is an important deity. She's one of the names. We also came fairly recently. We talked this name, Jagadatri. We gave a talk on Jagadatri as one who sustains the universe. But she has a unique form. She's usually seen with 4 arms, sometimes with 8 arms. She kills an elephant. She rides a lion. There's different things, certain iconographic qualities. And several times people were serving Holy Mother and saw her as Jagadatri. Or sometimes there was a story of one of her cooks, I think, a very eccentric Brahmin cook, and they were on a voyage, like from Calcutta to Jambati or the other way around. They stopped for a picnic and eat, and she took her aside and she like, Ma, you have to show me who you are. I'm your mother. No, that's not good enough. I know everyone says you're my mother. That's every old woman is my mother. That's Indian culture. Who are you directly? He says, are you the goddess? Yes, I'm the goddess. No, I don't believe you. You have to. People say such things, but just saying it doesn't make it so. And so, the story goes right there in front of everybody. Only he saw it though. Like she showed herself as Jagadatri, the golden, multi-armed deity, with her lion, the whole thing, right? And then, and of course, he became very agitated, excited by this. She calmed him down and said, "Don't tell anybody until after I die." So the story we know because eventually she died, and she told the story. I think she told Swami Sharananda and others about this story. But in it, she says, the cook, if I remember the story properly, which I may not, he asked, that means I saw you as Jagadatri, you're the goddess of the universe in human form. He says, yes. Unusual to get these type of direct answers from Holy Mother. She hid her divinity. Right? He said, then who is Jayā and Vijayā? Right? Whenever Durga comes with Jayā and Vijayā. When Devi comes with Jayā and Durga. And she said, Golap and Yogin. These are 2 female disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna had many famous female disciples, but probably the most, can't say the most famous, but they're the ones that they play. They're important in his Leela during his time teaching Dakshineshwari. Their stories are there, but they also became the attendants of Holy Mother, right? And very different personalities. Some of them very difficult. Jayā and Vijayā, these are protective deities. They're not meant to be nice. Protection means protection. They're not. A copy. If you put a guard at the door, you can't be. You should be a little bit rough, right? Like don't let any people in. Unless, there has to be. So they were highly developed personalities. That's something people say sometimes in India. They're highly developed personalities. And their stories and their personality become complicated when you read the story of Holy Mother and like life like that. But they were her constant attendants, right? They took care of her. They were always with her, right? So maybe it was like, oh, my Jayā and Vijayā are Golap Ma and Yogin Ma. Or maybe I'm Jagadatri and they literally are Jayā and Vijayā. Who can sell? Whether they're my Jayā and Vijayā, they're like my protectors, right? They're my attendants. Or literally they're Jayā and Vijayā in the real sense. Like we can only guess. So where are we? These names. Jayā, Vijayā. Then the next name is Nadī Sindhu. Let me find my notes here. We'll relate them shortly. So the translation that I was reading when I was just to catch the Devanagari and like that, it said Nadī Sindhu means rivers and oceans, right? And so that's a good place to start. That's a common thing. Ma is rivers, and Ma is oceans. That's okay, right? That you could say Ma is, and we've already mentioned many rivers that she is, right? She's a Saraswati river. She's Ganga, right? So we Yamuna. I think I'm not sure if we got to Yamuna or not, but she is the rivers, and we talked about how the rivers are a form of the Devi, and the places along the river are the Devi, like that. So Nadī, how do I say? But the thing is, Nadī is N short A, D long I, Nadī, right? The word for river, because in Sanskrit, long A and short A, sometimes they're the same word, it's just a slight adjustment in the meaning. I don't know enough to spoke with full authority, right? But Nadī, long A, means river, right? And short Nadī means vein, nerve, current, right? Like the nadis, like the veins that we considered nadis, not nadis, but they're related because they also flow like a river flows. So you can see they're related words, right? So maybe they're so related they can be used almost interchangeably. That might be the case. I don't know, right? But I was thinking about this because let's look at it as if they're related but not identical, so and see what meaning we can get from it, right? Sindhu means river, means ocean. So it means, that combination of river and ocean, if Nadī really means Nadī, so it means river and ocean. So she who is rivers, or she who is in the river, or she who is like a river, or she who is specific rivers. And Sindhu, she who is the ocean, she who is oceanic, she who is in the ocean. And all these things we could defend or describe different forms and quality of the goddess that are exactly those type of things. But I remember one of the way we interpret, if we're trying to give some meaningful interpretation of these names, is how they appear in the clusters. Why it appear next to Jayā, Vijayā, this cluster of names, right? So that's how I've been thinking, right? So if you take Nadī as Nadī, if you take it for not what it is, but what we hope it was, Nadī Sindhu could mean a river reaching the ocean, and remember, this is about meeting points, right? So maybe it is literally where the river meets the ocean. That's a very auspicious. We'll go back to that. I believe that's one of the main meanings here. But let's take another thing. If Nadī means river, Sindhu is also the name of a river. It means ocean, but the Sindhu is a very important river in Indian history, and related earlier we mentioned Saraswati, and Saraswati is of course a goddess of learning, but she's also a river. We talked a lot about the ancient Saraswati river, and we also mentioned that in very ancient times, right? The Vedic culture seems to have been on the banks of the Saraswati River and the Indus River. The Indus River is the Sindhu River. That's how it's known, right? The same river. They're used interchangeably. Now I think mostly it's used as Sindhu. I think that's how it's being used. It runs to Pakistan. It's the big river, longest river in Pakistan, right? Saraswati disappeared. We know by whatever the cause of the Saraswati disappearing. We discussed it, and the Sindhu or the Indu or the Sindhu River still flowing. But that shift, then the it seems, if we can, this is almost prehistory, so it's hard to, you can only from the evidence, trying to interpret evidence, scholars and historians and anthropologists trying to interpret evidence, they think that a lot of the culture migrated to the Ganga Yamuna. We mentioned this last couple of weeks. Migrated to the Ganga Yamuna plateau, and now we think of Hinduism as it is now based upon the Ganga and Yamuna. But if you go back to the Harappa type civilization, these were on the bank of the Saraswati and the Indu River. So if it's already mentioned Ganga and Saraswati, maybe this is a way of saying, and the river, she's also the river Sindhu, this ancient river that was so central to the Vedic period, and still the life flow of Pakistan now. It flows even, and Sindhu is also the name of a Sindh. Sindhu is the name of the place, the people and the places, like the state. I think it may be the name of state. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's still a name of a state in Pakistan. And a language, yeah. You can see, so it's that. Maybe she is that river and the culture and language and people that come from that world. I think it's a legitimate way of pulling it from it. But, as we mentioned, Nadī means river. Nadī doesn't mean river. Nadī means vein, right? Or tube, or pipe, or nerve, or blood vessel, pulse. The type of meaning, right? Nadī. So Nadī Sindhu, that's a different thing. Then it's like the vein river Narmada. River. Of course, a river is like a vein running through a country. It's bringing life, blood into a country. So that it could still do it, right? Right. And so if we take Nadī as Nadī Sindhu, as this, back to our Jayā Vijayā being where things meet, or Idam Pingala in between, Nadī Sindhu could be where the river and the ocean meet. And so Nadī Sindhu, that could be where these major places like Ganga Sagar and things like that, where these river meet. Ganga meets Sagar, the ocean, right? But because it's associated with Nadī instead of Nadī, and because it's right after Jayā Vijaya, my meditation on this is that it refers to Sushumna, right? It's like you have Jayā Vijaya, Ida and Pingala, right? The doorway deities in between as you go through, and the central Nadī reaching to the ocean. And so this could be, and I think it's justified to think, even if it's not, if it's a neat thing to talk about. It may not be at all what these verses mean. I realize nothing I'm saying could be at all what the verses mean, right? But we're using the verses to describe all kinds of cool tantric Shakta things. So, an opportunity to talk about these cool things. So, in which case, the Nadī is the Sushumna, and Sindhu, the ocean, is the 1,000 petal, or the larger expanding. When a river reaches the ocean, what happens to it? It expands. It becomes deep. It merges. Exactly. All these. It loses its identity and all these different ways you can think of it. Right. That's what happens to rivers when they meet the ocean. That could be what happens when prana and shakti comes through the Sushumna, and our consciousness goes to Sushumna like this, right? It could be. And so that becomes the ultimate sandhya place, the ultimate meeting place, not only between Ida and Pingala, but between Sushumna and Sahasranāma, 1,000. So the next name 231, Sarvamayī. Right, so I think this also allowed to say Sarvamayī means the one who is everything, or everywhere, or full of everything. I don't know, ever full. All these different ways you can pull it, right? So I think the experience of Sarvamayī, right? She who is everything and everywhere and everyone. All. Sarva means all encompassing, all together, like this, right? Sarva, or the most, the highest, the most of everything, the highest. Usually all is a bit, I think, the submitable, everybody together, everyone chant. She is everyone, or everyone is in her, she is in everyone. All these type of meaning, we're just guessing. Sarvamayī. So however you interpret Sarvamayī, it's a nice idea. We can think it and understand, God is Ma has become everything, or Ma is everything, or everything is in Ma. Just like, or we all merge in Ma. We can think of all these different things. But these are nice ideas, very beautiful, uplifting, inspiring ideas. But the realization of these ideas, the experience of these ideas, that happens at a stage of sadhana, right? Either a peak experience or a final experience. A peak experience or the peak experience, however it works, right? Right. So taking Jayā Vijaya Idam Pingala and taking Nadī Sindhu as Sushumna into Sahasranāma, Sarvamayī is experience equivalently. When we think of that experience, psychological or philosophical or religious personal experience, when we think of it using the language of the chakras and the map that we use of the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, the nadis and like that, then it's experienced in Sahasranāma. It's an experience of Nadī Sindhu when the soul merges, or when the energy goes into Sahasranāma. This is the experience one gets, as described by many saints. Sri Ramakrishna described when Actually, I wrote it down and then I lost my note. This page got lost, unfortunately, and then I ran out of time. Sri Ramakrishna's next statement, when the jiva, he describes what it experiences in each of these states, and in the Sahasranāma, one experiences that there's only one reality, one that like the ocean of consciousness. These type of statements, the ocean of, we use that possible type of experience, right? Then there's the equivalent there's verses in all such an experience, whether described as oceanic or non-dual or singular. There's different ways, cosmic or cosmic. Sometimes we describe both can be described. But however, it's this verse describes more of the cosmic, feeling the one ever expanding everything. The next or two names later, it's going to be the one that's like nothing. Right, so it can be the all cosmic where you're singing, so both of them can be experienced, right? But they're described in all kinds of, that may be the goal, we would think, of many philosophical, theological, yogic schools of within Hinduism, right? That such a realization is the goal. When that realization is conceptualized using the language of Ida Pingala Sushumna, then it's experienced, we describe that as a Sahasrasara experience. There's Sarvam iti, what is it? Vasudeva Sarvam iti. This is from Bhagavad Gita 7:19. This is considered, there's like core verses. This is like considered, this one line within a larger verse is considered like the supreme statement, a realization possible in the Bhagavad Gita by some, right? It says, Bahunam Jamanam Mante. It says after many births, right? This is a result after many births, much struggle, much failure and success, right? One attains, Krishna saying, this experience, right? That Vasudeva means Krishna saying me, right? Or Vasudeva, God, right? And we described Vasudeva many times, the all-pervading universal consciousness, Vasudeva, right? Vasudevam, Sarvam, same word, all, iti. That there's only Vasudeva. So that statement, actually the conclusion is everything is only Vasudeva. Like all-pervading consciousness who incarnated as the son of Vasudeva, as Krishna, right? He incarnated as Krishna. He is the supreme reality. But everything we see is only him. There's nowhere that he is not. Everything is contained in him. He is everything, right? That's ultimately the meaning of be bold. Many people consider this to be a very the super underlined verse of the Bhagavad Gita, right? He says, because Krishna says, after many births of struggle, this is what you'll realize. This is what my devotee realizes, right? He says, such a person, Mahatma, that person who realizes this is described as Mahatma, right? A great soul is one who knows that Vishnu, Vasudeva, the all-pervading Lord, is all there is. So Vasudeva Sarvam iti. It's a very famous. Many people, people know like a few simple lines of Gita. That's one of them. Vasudeva. Oh yes, Vasudeva idam iti. Right. As in our many talks on the Chandi, the peak of the Chandi, perhaps it's a peak moment in the Chandi of Ma's revelation during the battle between Shumba and Nishumba, when Shumba is now arguing that because Ma is there with all these different divine forms fighting. Narashingi and Brahmi and Indrani and Kālī and Ambika and all these different divine forms and winning. And so Shumba challenges that you're not playing fair. You're fighting with all these other Shaktis, right? And I'm alone. Of course, he came with 10,000 armies, right? So shows you his ideas were a little bit weird, filtered through his personal situation, and so she gives. It's considered the Mahavakya of if there's a Mahavakya in the Bhagavad Gita, I would say it's Sarvam iti, Vasudeva Sarvam iti. The Mahavakya of the Chandi is Ekavyaham Jagatyatra Dritya Ka Mama Para. Ekavyaham, there's only me, right? That's the main. Actually, I would say there's only me, right? Jagat, in this world, in this whole universe, there's only me, right? So that's how, of course, And then she shows it. All the different devis that are fighting, she absorbs into herself. But it's not just all. It's not there's only me, being all these fighting devis, and they're all just me. No, in this whole universe, not just on the battlefield, is only me. In the entire, it's a jagat. In every moving, vibrating corner of the universe, jagat, there's only me. Dritya ka mama para. Where is there another than me, the Supreme? Right? There's no. Where is there another? Where is there a second? Of course, we don't just see seconds. We see trillions, right? Seconds and thirds and fourths and fifths, and we see an unlimited variety. And of course, we can say, that one school of thought in certain forms of Vedanta says, that variety doesn't exist, right? That's an acceptable response. There's only one, yet we see many, so the many must not be true, right? That's one view. The Shakta tradition usually presents it a little differently, is that yes, there's many, and they're only her. She's become all these things, right? She is all these things, right? And all the things we see are changing name and form. She is all the things that are changing name and form, and she's the unchanging. The classic, beautiful example, back to the ocean example, of waves in the ocean. The waves come and go, but they're only made of ocean, right? But the ocean doesn't come and go. The ocean is still. But part of it that seems to be coming and going, we call waves. And so that's one way of thinking of the vibrating, seemingly and not just seemingly, actually populated universe, of multigated, variegated universe, right? Of names and forms, right? And not losing the fact that it's only one, that I'm the only one doing this, right? But so that's the truth of the Chandi. That's the ultimate statement of the Chandi. There's equivalent statements in every great text. We can go through. There's the Mahavakya of the Ramayana, the Mahavakya of the Devi Bhagavatam. I was trying to remember it and I couldn't. I literally, unfortunately, I wrote it, scribbled it down on a post-it note. This is my normal note, my scriptural scholarly note taking. It's on my desk somewhere on a pile of other little notes. But it's a very good. It makes this very statement. Ma in the Devi Bhagavatam tells Lord Brahma at the beginning of creation, "There's only me," basically in a different language, and using and then the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. We know there's only Brahman. We ourselves are Brahman. You ourselves are Brahman. It makes these type of statements, right? But that's experienced, such a truth. We believe it to be true. We hope it to be true. We can argue that it's true. We can like that, but we can experience it as true, right? In the heights of meditation or the depths of meditation, in moments of extreme intuitive knowledge, direct experience. Hopefully, that's the sages tell us. The scriptures tell us that these things are experientiable and knowable, not just understandable in a general way, but actually deeply known, vijnana compared to jnana. But that experience, we would call that, in the yogic tradition, that experience comes at the Sahasranāma and the 1,000, where the Nadī meets the Sindhu, right? I am the only one in the universe. Who else is there besides me? Or Vasudeva Sarvam, that Vasudeva alone exists everywhere. These type of statements can be found. So the next name, where are we? I should have repeated it in my notes, so I have to scroll up. Still learning this new program. Nadī Sindhu Sarvamayī Tārā śūnya-nivāsinī. So now Tārā. So of course we love Tārā. And actually we mentioned last week a lot about Tārā. Because we talked about there's Nīla Sarasvatī, which we mentioned as a form of Tārā. mātaṁgī, which is related to Tārā and Sarasvatī. We mentioned those type of things. Right? But Tārā, as a specific, Tārā has, she could mean, she is the goddess that's known as Tārā, right? That Kālī is that goddess. She's showing that she's one of the forms of the Mahadevi, right? Or Tārā could be her qualities. She is the qualities of Tārā that we worship as a separate deity. So Tārā is derived from the Sanskrit word tri, or tri, which means to cross. Crossing over is tri, right? And so part of crossing over, something that crosses from one place. So again, you can see its relation to doorways and thresholds, and that it becomes that crossing over point. She is the one who helps us cross over. And there's another secondary meaning that's derived from the same idea. When you're suffering, and if on this side of the crossing point is birth, death, old age, disease, and rebirth of an indeterminate nature, the world of samsara, crossing over is the opposite, is freedom from that, right? So the crossing over becomes saving, or we in religious language, liberating or saving, right? So she becomes not the crossing over, but Tārā means the savior or savioress, right? The one who liberates, the one who saves us, the one who takes us across, Tārā, right? And she's also been absorbed into the Dashmahavijaya tradition. Kālī, she's the second. Kālī, Tārā, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari in the Dashmahavijays. Sorry, I'm pointing with my left hand. It's okay, she's a left-handed deity, so it's in our bylaws. We're not allowed to do such things. I have to do it with my right hand. the Tārā is there. And you can see her form is very similar to Kālī, right? And we'll mention that a little bit. Actually, we'll mention, it's interesting why she's similar to Kālī. So there's all kinds of, if you could look online, you click around, there are all kinds of fun stories out there of Tārā. But one of the one I like, because we've told this story from different perspectives already, where maybe when we talked that Sita is one of Ma's name, we talked about it maybe 3-4 weeks or maybe a month ago or something, right? And I told the story how Sita literally, we talked about Sita's back, what she means as a fertility goddess before her inclusion in Ramayana, and connected to the story of Rama, like as an independent goddess, and then the story of Rama. But then literally she's Kālī in the Adbhuta Ramayana. I mentioned that the fully Shakta, amazing, Adbhut means amazing, strange, amazing, and spiritual, Adbhut Ramayana. She takes on, Ram couldn't kill Ravana. Right now, our Ravana has 10 heads. We've been told this story. That Ravana, at that time, had 10,000 heads. And Ram, she waited for the year, because as per the story, you have to come and save me. He came, tried to save her, and couldn't kill him. Right? Ravana was very powerful. Because also, who's Ravana? Who's Ravana? He's Vijayā, or Jayā, or one of these two gatekeepers, right? So and he's considered the highest devotee. He got the highest devotee of Shiva, an incarnation of a gatekeeper of Vishnu, and the greatest devotee of Shiva, right? Somebody of exquisite quality. Rama couldn't kill him easily, right? And so Sita said, fine, I'll do it. And she took on the form of Kālī, right? So in that story, which of course, as Shaktas, we like this, we know it suits our theology, right? So she took the form of Kālī and slew the demon Ravana, right? So then Brahma, and that's in the Adbhuta Ramayana, Brahma and the other devas began to praise her, beautiful hymns, right? And then she calmed down, because she was, imagine, if she has to take on a Kālī, a very fierce form of Kālī, right, in order to kill 1,000-headed Ravana, it was a very fierce form. That means she had more than 1,000. She had at least 1,000 heads, right? They're like, and equally, however you approach me, I respond. You approach as 10,000-headed Ravana, you're going to get a 10,000-headed Kālī in response, right? And so when the gods prayed to her, she began to calm down, right? And then she assumed a calmer form as Tārā in this story, right? So Kālī then became Tārā, a step down, right? You can see Kālī is black, Tārā is blue. She's the color, everything's becoming a little bit subdued, a little toned down, temperature lowered bit by bit, right? Right. So holding her sword in her right hand, because also Kālī is Digambari, we mentioned she's naked and wild. Her hair is wild. Her body is naked. Was weapon, it's a very fierce form. As she calms down, she begins to adjust her form, right? So Brahma gives her a tiger skin to cover herself. And so I'm not sure this one. Yeah, she's, I think, wearing a tiger. Sometimes you'll see her wearing a tiger skin, right? So she's not naked like Kālī. She has a loincloth or a skirt of a tiger skin given by Brahma, right? She removed. So she took her wild hair and tied it up. Because now remember, we've talked about disheveled hair goddesses compared to bound hair goddesses, a way of controlling her energy. So she tied it with was an ancient snake, an ancient serpent of the ancient named Ashokya, which is one of the divine serpents of the ancient world in the ancient text. Shutaidhara was a snake like that. Her jata, she had into one single matted lock on top of her head, right? And then Rudra, Lord Vishnu, the fierce one, Rudra laid down in front of her, right, on the floor, right, and requested a boon. This is interesting, because in the Kālī we've told them why Kālī stands on Shiva. We gave all kinds of reasons. This is one that we didn't give, right? Seeing this, you have to think, imagine this moment. Mahakali, 10,000 heads, right? Taking its divine form. Now, now Shiva, this is a highly Shakta text, right? So Shiva realizing she is the supreme Brahman, right? It's full Shakta text, right? I want Brahmagyan. So he prays, I lie down in front of you. You please teach me the truth of Brahman. Give me the knowledge of Brahman, right? And so, what was her response? She put her foot on his chest, right? So this is not so interesting. He lays down surrender. You tell me the knowledge of Brahman, and she touches his chest with her foot. Of course, this is very deep, but also so devotional. We imagine we meditate on Ma's feet, and we meditate on Ma's feet in our heart. So installed her feet in Shiva's heart, and thus given him Brahmagyan. It's a very beautiful. Right, and then, as thanks, then Shiva gave her some gifts. Right, it's dakshina. What's your dakshina? Somebody brings you Brahmagyan, you got to give some dakshina. Right. So the dakshina she gives is a blue lotus and a skull cup. And so if you see pictures of Tārā, very often she's seen with a lotus and a skull cup. These are common things. Sometimes she's seen as it's so similar to there's another interesting story. There was a how do I say? In the Vaishnava tradition we have this demon called Hayagriva, who steals the Vedas, and then Vishnu takes on a form just like Hayagriva, because he has a boon that you're going to be killed by someone who's the same name and form. Hayagriva had a horse head and a human body. Right, and so Vishnu takes on a form with a horse head and a human body and kills, and also becomes known as Hayagriva. It's a very important tantric deity. But in the Devi Bhagavatam, the Devi tradition, Hayagriva is a different demon, and Devi herself kills him. And in a certain sense, this is a transition from as the development of the Devi lore, the Devi Bhagavatam. A lot of these ancient stories got retold from a Shakta perspective. Right, and so in that form, this demon Hayagriva who stole the Vedas was creating havoc everywhere, right? And so the Devas approached him, and they approached Brahma. Brahma told them to go to Kālī. Kālī created another goddess, Tārā, right, from her third eye. Just like in the Chandi, from Durga comes Kālī, the similar type of thing. Here from Kālī comes Tārā. You go and kill Hayagriva, like this, right? And so in better she killed Hayagriva. But they're so similar. Kālī and Tārā have such similar iconography. One's black, one's blue. They both hold sword. Some little differences are there. Often you'll see Tārā as pregnant, as one of the iconographical different. Right? She's seen as younger than Kālī. Right? Interesting. And because Kālī, remember here, Tārā comes from Kālī, so Kālī is younger than Kālī. Then Tārā is younger than Kālī. That's one of the ways like that. So sometimes we don't quite do it here, but a lot of paintings you'll see Kālī, and then you'll see Shiva. I don't think we like Shiva as the ascetic, very handsome ascetic, or something like that. But often in Bengali paintings, Shiva with Kālī will have a very big belly, and the reason he has a very big belly, he's a married man, and he gets fed very nicely. Right, and I know so many of my friends that were really thin in college when they were starving in college, right? And then they got married and they began to have enough food, enough beer. Their stomach began to come out. You get. It's a sign of a happy domestic life, right? So, but Tārā is younger, and so usually the Shiva under Tārā is thin in Bengali paintings like this, right? Tārā is often seen pregnant, and with Shiva, the thinner. These are little different. Sometimes you're looking at paintings, is that Kālī? Sometimes the iconography is identical. But you see which one's Kālī and which one's Tārā. You have to, these are some ways you can tell. How Shiva, she a little fatter than the normal Kālīs. You have to see like this. Right. Other form. Anyway, there's many cool things about Kālī, but about Tārā. There's interesting. So Tārā, I mentioned Tārā, the goddess Tārā is a distinct goddess that came from, as we're describing. But Tārā means savior or saving, and so Tārā in Tantra is also associated with sound, but not just it's saving sound. And saving sound, manastrayate. One, what is it that mantra? May I got it right. That which is repeated, when repeated, saves the mind, right? Is called mantra. Uses this trayate, comes from a similar type of that which takes you across the mind, liberates the mind. When repeated, when thought about, that's called japa. So mantra or japa is the things thought, the thing said, the word repeated, expressed, that liberates the mind. Right, so sometimes, like the Omkara is called the Tāraka mantra, or Rama is called the Tāraka mantra. It says that in that Japata, Kashi, Mahata Japata, Tapata. There's one that famous Ram Bhajan. But it says in Kashi, Lord Shiva is always chanting the Ramnam, right? He's doing the Tāraka Japa. And so the belief is, and Sri Ramakrishna saw this. He saw when he went, we told this story already when we talked about Kashi. He, at the Manikarnika Ghat, he saw that the souls, that Ma Tārā was coming with scissors. Sometimes she holds a knife, sometimes she holds scissors. Another iconographical detail. And she was liberating people. She's Tārā, she's cutting, freeing people of their karmas. Right? And then Shiva was coming and whispering Tāraka mantra, the liberating mantra. Now it could just be whatever mantra we get is the liberating mantra. But in tradition, liberating mantra is either Omkara or Rama. Rama is a liberating mantra, and that's as per the tradition of like that. He's giving Ramnam some mantra to liberate, and he's seeing the souls be liberated. You think just dying in Kashi, how does that liberate you? You have karmas, right? Unless you're free of desire and free of karma, you'll be reborn. That's what the scripture says, right? But if Ma Kālī is cutting off your karmas, and Shiva himself is initiating to a mantra that liberates you, then maybe it's possible dying in Kashi and being cremated to Manikarnika Ghat, you become liberated. Right. So that's an interesting, that she is that liberating sound, and also it's related again to going beyond, the Ida Pingala, Sushumna, Sindhu, as we were discussing earlier. Of course, the famous temple most famous temple in Bengal is called Tadapit, right, in village Bengal. And that's supposed to be, some say it's a Shakti Pitam, some say it's a Siddha Pitam. Siddha Pitam because it's a place where Bhamakepa attained perfection, and many saints before him attained perfection. A Shakti Pitam has to be a place where the part of the Devi fell. And there's different stories. Some say it's not a Shakti Pitam, others say it is a Shakti Pitam where Ma's third eye fell. And I think that's also significant in our interpretation of Ida, Pingala, Sushumna. I think it's a very significant thing. Anyways, it's a very fascinating story, and unfortunately we can't give more class on Tadapit, but it's a very fascinating temple. So the final name, we don't have time for it, but I want to finish this final name to finish this cluster, so you'll take a few minutes here. Śūnya-nivāsinī, the final name of this cluster, name 233. Śūnya-nivāsinī. Śūnya means, anybody know? You know. Emptiness, right? Void, emptiness, zero. And Nivāsinī means she who dwells in, one who lives or dwells in the void, in the emptiness. It's a very interesting name, right? So a simple thing, if we're connecting her again to this cluster of names where we're giving Jayā, Vijayā, and Pingala, and Nadī Sindhu as Sushumna and Sahasranāma, and Tārā to have that symbolism. So here again, śūnya-nivāsinī, she who dwells. What is Shunya? Shunya could just we get very nervous with this term void or emptiness, because if God's the void, I mean God doesn't exist or something. Like we could think, oh my God, then that's not what's meant here, because she is the void and she dwells in the void, means that she is the content of the void also. right? So it's not that she doesn't exist. This is an aspect of her, one of her qualities. And so what is a void? You could think of it perhaps as that which is beyond thought, right? Like when we fill our consciousness. Actually, without thoughts in our consciousness, we don't know our consciousness. We think we're conscious of things. We're conscious of something. That's called consciousness, right? Otherwise, we don't know consciousness. But what if there's nothing to be conscious of, or the distinction between the knower and the known disappear, right? Then what's left is no known and knower exists. Then there's no thought. That's the definition of thought: knowing and known, thinker, thinking, thought. That's the very definition. Without that, what do you have? You have, in a certain sense, nothing, right? In the classical sense, right? You can almost think of like no thing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing to think about. There's not a distinct like that, but it's not nothing in the normal. So in the tantric literature, this language gets used a lot as to something which is beyond concept, beyond thoughts, beyond in the non-dual awareness, pure awareness, but not aware of anything, just pure awareness as itself. As soon as you're aware of something, you have duality. That's the thing. So that's like, pure awareness. That's not the pure awareness means duality. You're aware of something. What about pure awareness that's not aware of anything? Then what would you describe that? It's nothing. It's void. It's not nothing. It's her. From her comes everything, right? From that one, from within the of the pure awareness, then comes the one who's aware, and that which you're aware of. Therefore, she becomes Sarvamayī. She becomes everything. That's how she becomes everything. She's everything and the container of everything, which is no thing, right? She contains everything. So this is this play of duality and non-duality, right? As we've mentioned, we invoke Chinnamasta with the idea Idam Pingala and Chinnamasta. Chinnamasta strongly represents this when it's taken a little bit philosophically. When the energy comes up so dramatically, beyond Pingala, beyond even, literally blows her head off. And to lose your head means to go beyond concepts. That's one of the meanings of losing your head. You're beyond the duality of concepts of subject and object. You've gone beyond duality. So she loses her head. But another thing, we've talked about this in our Chinnamasta talks before. When Chinnamasta cuts off her head, she doesn't. We would think, we lose our head. She loses her body. It's another thing. The body represents, the head is pure awareness, right? That is, and the body is nama rupa, stuff, the world of name and form, the world of things, right? So this is the experience of the Kundalini finally coming up, as per yogic tradition, if we interpret these names in that way, is pure awareness beyond leaving the world of relative objects of name and form, even fullness behind, into that which leaves those concepts get left behind completely, right? So and in this, even in our image of Ma, we sometimes think like that. From Shiva, consciousness becomes this whole world, comes in the world duality, and then we follow her back to the one. We interpret it like this image of Ma is also seen as the fully awakened Kundalini, right? Shiva is consciousness. Kālī comes up and stands on top of it, so she's even beyond the whole thing. The Chinnamasta image is the sign of a fully awakened Kundalini, right? So this is describing the experiences of a Sahasrāna experience. And I think the names warrant this type of connection, right? But she dwells in the void. She is the void. That means that the void, or the nothingness, the formless, right, is not nothing. It's not that we think, that means she doesn't exist. She is the thing that doesn't exist. Not existence. There's verses like this: existence and non-existence dwell in me. She makes such statements, or dwell in her. Other people make such statements about her. Realized saints. So that makes no sense in my mind. Normal way of thinking. All that exists and all that doesn't exist. Existence and non-existence dwell in me. She is the reality, the substratum of even non-existence, and then she fills all the details of non-existence and existence. Those are also her, right? So it's a very, of course, I think every name in the Sahasranāma, every name, everything, every name points to Ma's the one, how the one becomes everything. And then these verses, by giving some hints and using Kundalini type languages, may also show a map, a traditional map of how we realize, how we can realize how the one became, how the one becomes and is everything and remains beyond everything. So I think we'll leave it there because I'm now officially 7 minutes late. My count, I have a new thing with a countdown talk, but I missed it. According to this, I have 30 minutes and 44 seconds left. So I think I did something wrong. I'm learning new things. So anyway, thank you for your kind attention. We won't take questions. I'm not interested in anybody else's opinion. And we don't have time. No, I'm very interested in everyone's opinion. So that was good. All right. Last sip of cold tea.